Zen at the Sharp End. Welcome to the podcast about how to turn difficult people and relationships into your best teachers. I'm Mark Westmackett, a Zen Buddhist teacher, mindfulness teacher, and ex-professional astronomer. This is a podcast to go along with my latest book, Zen and the Art of Dealing with Difficult People, which is out now and available to order in all the usual places. In each episode, we'll be exploring different varieties of people, relationships, and situations that we find irritating, difficult, or painful. Together with a number of Zen friends, I'll be discussing how the practices of Buddhism and mindfulness can help us see our difficult people as troublesome Buddhas, our greatest teachers. This podcast is sponsored by Zen Minded, an online lifestyle store offering you the very best in Japanese craft, incense, and other Zen-inspired home goods. Check it out at www.zenminded.uk. Okay, well, hello and welcome, Bhante. Great to have you on the podcast.
Great to be here.
I wonder if perhaps we could start off by just talking a little bit about, your background and your history and how you ended up as a monk and practicing in your tradition.
Well, my story is a little bit unorthodox because I was born into a very Catholic missionary family, and it's been about since 2011, so about 11 years since I ordained and became a monk. And my inclinations to become a monk actually arose from my journey to convert a very elderly monk into becoming a Christian.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Gosh. So, because I remember this monk, he was amazing, and he was such a scholar. And every time that I met him, I would try to sort of, tell him that Christianity is it and all of that. And he would respond in such a profound way that I needed to find a way to beat him. Mind you, I was about 13 years old here.
And where were you then?
I was in Sri Lanka. So I was born in Sri Lanka, bred partly between Sri Lanka and Australia. Mm-hmm. But most of my time I spent in Sri Lanka. And this was in Sri Lanka. And the only reason that I started really researching about Buddhism was to actually win an argument with this monk.
Yeah.
And look what happened to me now.
Okay. So did you end up sort of going down to the local monastery, or?
Well, my mother had all of these friends who were monks. Not because of any religious reason, but because of political reasons. And because my mother was in politics, and in Sri Lanka, if you're in politics, you need to know monks. So it was not the most purest sort of influence as well in terms of the monks that we were seeing. However, they would be very senior. They would be very profoundly educated in the scriptures, and my research into Buddhism really started there.
And then how did you end up coming to the UK then?
So as I started with this sort of book about the Buddha's life story, this book was written by this author called Ambedkar, and Ambedkar was the person who brought back Buddhism to India in a way, and the person who wrote the Constitution of India. As a Catholic, I was on a journey myself. Right. I was, having the hormones of a teenager. I was trying to figure out how I'm going to sort of cure this internal dialogue, which was so messy at the time, so violent and aggressive. And I was praying, I was doing all of these things, but nothing worked. And that sort of prayer and all of that, for me, it turned into self-hate. where I was thinking that I was broken because my mind was so busy, right? And it was only when I came across this book, started meditating with a little instruction in the book, I found, wow, it was only 15 minutes, but I realized how quickly it really cured this sort of aggressive internal dialogue, that I had so much more space and clarity in my mind now. And I was bewildered. I was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. So really, Mark, if you would ask me to sort of, in brief, tell me, why did I become a Buddhist? It was really to become closer to God.
Yeah.
It started with that, because at the end, through prayer, I wanted to be closer to God. But then through meditation, it really showed me how to do that. And later on, of course, going into the Buddhist scriptures and all of that, I found that there was so much that I could potentially do with myself, right? And that is when I thought I need to become a monk.
Yeah.
And then I went to Burma. I became a monk there, and I was there for about 6 years in a forest monastery. And I actually moved to the UK for my master's in cognitive science, which I've completed now, and I decided to stay on.
Nice, lovely. Oh, well, yeah, lovely. I mean, it sounds like there's the first troublesome Buddha that perhaps we could you encountered, was that your mind as a teenager and that kind of it's almost like the troublesome self, or part of ourself, that we sort of come to terms with and understand, and actually how that in itself is a wonderful teacher, in sort of guiding us along this path.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I would say the word Buddha, it comes from the Pali root Bodh, which is enlightenment. So when we have troublesome Buddha, and we look at the Buddha nature within us, it is those for me, it is those impediments that we have in our life that keeps us from a state of enlightenment within the present moment, right? And we have so much of examples within the scriptures, within the practice, where we know people, or we read the stories of people who've been able to attain to a state of enlightenment with brief instruction. But what or why is it that we need so much of instruction, years of practice? Oh my gosh, so much of work.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
So much of work that we need to put into. And I see that as the troublesome Buddha, where whilst we see the truth, or whilst we see that our minds are not in the right place, there is so much of underlying attachment, so much of fear for change, that we hold on to the worst parts of ourselves in a way that we think that we are safer, because this is being with what we know, rather than the fear of the unknown comes to sort of stop us in our journey. Because enlightenment is something in Buddhism, it says, which is supramundane, which is beyond the worldly sort of sense, right? So the supramundane to a mundane person is quite unnatural.
Scary.
It's scary. It's unknown. It's not a path that we've been on. Yeah.
Say, better the devil that you know than the devil that you don't. That's what they say.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. So I wonder, in your sort of training and your background, your practice, have you come across sort of working with people, particularly difficult people, and people that sort of bring up irritation, frustration, anger? Has that been as a part of something specifically you've worked with?
Yes, very much actually. And for some reason, I find myself gravitating towards people who are trying to overcome the darkest parts themselves. Because I have a career. For years, I've had this where I love working with prisoners. And usually, when I am posted to the service or of a certain category, I always tend to get the more sort of seasoned criminals,
Yeah, okay.
the murderers, the psychopaths, and I just love working with that band, even in Sri Lanka, even in Burma, in the UK.
Mm.
So I work with different sort of prison groups, and I love working with them, Mark, for one specific reason: there is authenticity,
Mm.
realness. So we do not really need to sort of be wasting time on sort of trying to get a person to trust us, to sort of, reveal themselves to us. They would reveal themselves at the first session. And that makes our journey to work with them easier. There's so much. I remember there was this prison that I in the UK, and we had such an amazing session, right? A lot of banter, it's such an amazing session of
Yeah.
mindfulness. And
So
these
you would be
guys,
teaching a bit of mindfulness and meditation and that kind of thing? Or?
yes, it would
Yeah.
be very much on mindfulness, meditation,
Yeah.
wellness, Buddhism,
I see.
secular Buddhism. It would be a mix.
Mm.
Right. And I remember the guys at the end of the session. So usually what we would be doing is we would shake their hands. The guys were so sort of, we had such a fun time together that they didn't want to shake my hand. They wanted to give me a hug.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And they had arms the size of my face.
Yeah.
And I remember me being a little bit nervous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because all of them were murderers, who had a history of, I was like, okay, when is my neck going to snap? But yes, so
that's so interesting. It so people like that you find to be really very open and very willing to sort of discuss their deepest, fears and worries and things.
Yes, because mostly these sessions, the way that they are advertised within the prison system is that they are open. No one is forced to join them, and because they have so much of time in their hands, they tend to do a bit of research before on their own, speak to people. I've actually, in Sri Lanka, in India, and in Burma, I found prisoners, and they've related to me that they do not want to leave prison because they have such a steady practice of mindfulness.
Huh.
Right. And I've met people who are in high security prisons who have a 13-hour, 19-hour meditation practice. Beautiful practitioners. Right. Beautiful practitioners, and completely changed within the prison, and they don't want to leave prison.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's a very, it's almost like if you can set it up right, it's like the ideal place.
Exactly.
To practice, lots of free time and
absolutely.
So for you personally, then meeting these people in prison, I mean, as much as they're open about stuff, they can't be the easiest person to sort of, or people to sort of, do you find them sort of pressing some buttons in you, like inciting a bit of frustration? Or
to be very honest, Mark, never. I've had more trouble teaching people outside of prisons than people in prisons. And people are quite surprised when I say this, because what I find is in the outside world, people are so infatuated with the image that they want to put out, that the sometimes the lies that they might sort of tell themselves have become real. They have told these lies to themselves all throughout their lives, that it has manipulated them to believe that these lies are true. Right. And the hardest part as a Buddhist monk, as a therapist, as a cognitive therapist, as a person teaching mindfulness, is getting through that facade and really getting people to open up, because mindfulness, Buddhism, is all about being real. Being able to accept the present moment. And what is more present about the moment than reality?
Absolutely. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have any particular examples of interactions, relationships, situations which have ended up, you found your buttons being pressed? It's been sort of like tricky to sort of navigate the relationship.
Well, outside the prison system, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
In general?
maybe in general. Yeah.
Well, yes, I have. I remember a situation where, after a mindfulness lecture and a lecture about sort of pursuing things which one is passionate about, which is pursuing things or creating a life where one can truly live how one wants to live. I remember there was this family, they had invited their business partners over as well, and the business partners came into a realization that they didn't want to be in this business.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and so the business partner pulled out, right, after this, and he wanted to do something which he was passionate about, which he was, I think the difficulty, of course, the family did relate. They are sort of that they were upset about this, obviously.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I will preach the Dhamma, but it is important that everyone realizes that this is not an overnight process, right? And that is something that we often see in mindfulness. In people are accustomed to these sort of instant things,
right?
Now more than ever, that they want to make change, proper good change, of course, but overnight. But that doesn't work. You can't bake, although the ingredients are so good, you can't bake a loaf of bread without proofing the dough.
Right.
You have to allow time. You have to, and the thing is, I might preach something, or you might say something, or Daizan might say something. But the thing is, this is what we say. How does what I say fit into your life? That is something you have to work with. Be authentic to yourself and try to sort of see how this teaching fits into your life. I remember, Mark, now I remember another story, which is a personal story. When I became a monk, and there's an image that a monk is expected, especially when you're in Sri Lanka or sort of a cultural, traditional environment. There's an image that you have to sort of fit into. And I come from a very different background, right? Where, very city boyish, very sort of, it was a different background to the background that most monks would come from. I was a born Catholic, my parents were in these missionary circles. It was completely different. So my attitude to approaching daily life was very different. So when the monks would sort of say, take for example, we would say Teruvan Sannai or Buddha Sannai, which is like a holy greeting, right? May the Buddha be with you, or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. For me, and it's in Sinhalese, for me, it didn't fit well, because I couldn't say that authentically, because that was not my jam, if I might say that.
Yeah.
For me, I would be able to, because whatever you say, you have to be authentic, and you had to feel it. So for me, it was good morning. And I would say good morning with all my metta and loving kindness, right? But this didn't fit well with some of the traditional
see.
monks.
I see.
Right? Because it was so different from all the others. Right? And I remember some of my closest friends, of course, at the time, them sort of telling me, look, like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do, you know what I mean? And constantly I was made to feel as if I wasn't enough.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it was only years after looking back and realizing it wasn't true.
Mm.
So you need to realize and figure out, because we, even as monks, even as spiritual leaders or people who know some sort of spirituality, we need to realize the individuality of persons.
Mm.
And that is so important.
Mm.
Right? I mean, isn't that the whole reason that we have so much of trauma with our parents, for example?
Right.
Them trying to make us what they want us to become, but the reality is, no, I'm a different person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this can happen in spiritual circles as well. We have to realize that persons are different and unique. And this sort of Buddhism or mindfulness fits into the unique crevices in different ways. And you need to find that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, in Zen, they talk about sort of each individual having their own kind of quote way, you know, like the Zen, like it's their way, like it's the way of I don't know, a way of an office worker, or the way of a farmer, or the way of a man living in London in 2022 versus I don't know, a woman living in Sri Lanka in 1950, or whatever it is. It's just like your personal individual
Absolutely.
way of doing things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because we find in the scriptures, we have people from all backgrounds coming to the Buddha. And the Buddha did not discriminate. There were murderers who came to the Buddha. There were people who were in the sex industry who came to the Buddha. There were a wide range, kings and queens, normal people, people who were sort of who would kill animals for a living.
Yep.
You know, all of these people. And the Buddha taught the Dhamma to everyone. Right? The Buddha did not expect everyone to fit into one frame. If that was so, then the Buddha is not the Buddha.
Right.
Because that is far from what reality is.
So in terms of, like, you know, our everyday, you know, Buddhist practice, when it comes to, you know, that there are certain people that we find harder to deal with than others, just because they, you know, they resonate with us, or they perhaps jar with us in a certain way. They spark off, or they remind you of something you didn't like, or parts of yourself you don't like. But you're saying, so it's so important that we acknowledge that and come to the point where we can offer ourselves, or the Dharma, or whatever it is, to each individual as they are, you know, as we are, even if they are particularly troublesome, difficult, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think yes. And also the fact we need to, when it comes to other people being troublesome, I feel like we also need to act another part, which is realizing how to not take on another person's burdens into our own life. Not to take another person's energy into our life. I remember in the prison, and in Sri Lanka, usually people worship monks. They touch our feet and worship. They bow down in worship. So after my lecture or whatnot, they would be so happy that they would sort of, you know, want to sort of touch me wherever, right? Feet or hands or whatever. And I remember feeling the energies and vibrations of each and every individual person. Right. And I felt, and it was not a pleasant feeling. It was not a pleasant feeling. Right. Because I individually felt the amount of anger and hate and guilt. It was so distinct. and clear as there were maybe about 150 hands,
Okay.
but I would be able to feel like each and every hand as I walked past and they touched my feet or whatever. Right. But the thing is, as a practitioner, as we get sensitive to all of these things, and there is a part in our meditation where we become really sensitive to all of these vibrations and energies, we need to realize that these vibrations can be kept external and you do not have to pick up on them and welcome them inside.
Yeah.
That is your power as a practitioner. Right. The world can have so much going on, but doesn't mean that we have to take that burden upon ourselves. We can interact with it, we can deal with it, but we need to be able to know where to draw the line in a way that harm or that burden doesn't become ours. How else can a monk associate so many people, know the lives? Because people come and tell us all sorts of things about their lives.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we need to have the mental stability to not welcome those burdens into our life, but be able to have the compassion, the wisdom to help these people.
Yeah.
And that is important for everyone.
Yeah. Right. Beautiful words. Absolutely. What would you say for yourself has been the main way in which to sort of practice allowing the stuff to come, but not letting it stick? If someone came to you and said, oh, I'm really struggling at work, we've got someone with some difficult energy, and what can I do?
Self-realization. Self-realization. The Buddha says, we are the world. Everything that you find inside is also the same thing that you find outside. Understand your pain and you will understand the pain of others. Understand your guilt and you will understand the guilt of others. Understand your human nature and you will understand the human nature of others. You simply have to understand yourself. That's it.
So inquiring and acknowledging and coming to terms with your own sort of suffering, as it were.
This happens as we meditate. That's the truest place that we can go to see ourselves. Because when we meditate, when we close our eyes, when we are not working with the outside world, but simply noticing, observing what is inside, we realize our truest natures, our hindrances, our impediments, our qualities of mind, right there like a picture. Right? You do not have to comment about this. You do not have to engage with it. It is simply something that you notice. Just allow that process to do what it does best, I would say. Because we go into trying to sort of uncover, because this system is very complex. That is what I found with my sort of self-exploration. It is so complex. Right? Sometimes the hate that you have today is because of an experience 20 years ago with your parents or with some person. So complex. And some of these things you can't really solve. Your father might be dead.
Yeah.
Right? How are you going to solve it? Who are you going to talk about it? No. It is not in the external world. It is in the internal. And you simply observe that nature. And all of it, in your own time, all of it unfolds. Allow that beauty of practice to take place in your life. That is reality, not Buddhism. That is reality.
Right. Not specific to any kind of tradition or teaching. It's just the way things are as a human, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that is why I refuse to believe that Buddhism is a religion. It is simply not. And Mark, the more that we go deeper into Buddhist metaphysics, the Abhidhamma, and all of these different parts of teachings, it is like physics, it's like a science, it is like psychology. Right? A lot of the things that I learned in university here for my master's in cognitive science are things that I've read and experienced with Buddhism. There is actually a book, I'll share it with you, maybe you'd be interested. It's a book written by a neuroscientist, sharing, where neuroscience and Abhidhamma, Buddhist Abhidhamma, draws parallels and beautifully explained. Right.
Yeah. I've got a friend who's a what do you call it? A psychiatrist, a pretty high up psychiatrist. And he said the first meditation retreat he went on, 5 days in silence, he said he learned more about the way his mind works than through all of his teaching and learning through all of his university.
Absolutely. I have so many psychiatrists at my sessions already, and they say the same thing. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And we must understand the core of the Buddhist teachings is to attain to a state which is not a frame, which is not governed by concept, which goes beyond concept. And how do we go into a state which is not governed by concept? If we are putting ourselves back into a concept of religion, a concept of frame of being, right? The Buddha's teachings surpass all of these frames that we create.
So in terms of like, if we're in the world and we come across someone who we sort of label as being, oh, this person's difficult, this person's angering me, this person is tricky, that sort of in itself is a label, is a concept. Like, this is difficult, this is going to cause me problems. Absolutely. So if we get to the point where we're like beyond that, it's just this, it's just a person, isn't it? We just
it is, I would say, it is simply potential. You see, those three roots that I spoke of, greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, the 6 roots, 3 good, 3 bad, right? It is very much a part of human life or life that we would operate, that any human, that any being really would have greed, hatred, delusion, and non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. If we realize this about human nature and human life, why do I expect humans around me to not lie? How can I expect humans around me to not be mad? In a way of angry? How can I expect humans around me to operate without delusion? These are qualities of human nature, the negative as well as the positive. Sometimes they show the negative, sometimes they show the positive. Am I then the fool for expecting a person who is human to act in a sense of godliness? How can a human act godly? That's not, but we expect that out of people. So who is the ignorant person here? If I am expecting that out of a normal human being who's living a normal life, that is my fault, not that person's fault. Because it's that person's human nature as well as my human nature. It is my delusion that I expect godliness from a mere human.
Yeah. So that can very much be the root of what we find troublesome and difficult about people, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly. People are flawed by nature. Everyone, when we sort of get into relationships or whatever, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or whatever it is, we will get disappointed at times. And that is nature. If you don't want to get disappointed, then ostracize yourself from the whole entire world and try to live underground. Because at times, living in the UK, even the weather disappoints us.
Right. Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. there is going to be disappointment, and that is fine. Right?
Yeah.
That is fine. That is our practice. That's the beauty of the world. That's the adventure.
And that's so wonderful to hear you say that with such an enormous smile and laugh, because it's like coming to terms and just being okay with this stuff is the practice, isn't it? So
absolutely. And the thing is, we are infatuated, we are obsessed with wanting permanence. We want things to be the same. We are obsessed with the future, that we do not enjoy the present, right? People ruin beautiful relationships, and we need this at this time of the world. We need this. We need to realize that things are changing so fast around us. We need to realize that this beauty of life is in the present. And regardless of what you do, we will one day have to leave all of these things behind. Regardless of what we do, whether I am a legendary monk or whether I am just a simple monk, regardless, I will one day succumb to death.
Yeah.
So why don't I just live a happy life in the moment?
Exactly. It's that simple, huh?
It's simply that simple. We are infatuated with this sense of greatness that people create, that we forget it is through selling greatness that this world runs its capitalism.
Yeah, right.
If I have the new iPhone, I will be happier. If I wear designer, people will look at me different. It's always the next best thing. We need to realize, we need to become smarter about life and realize that people, the world, is using us. So how do I live in a way that I am not being used, but I am actually investing in myself? That is what we need to become awake to. Truly investing in ourselves.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and to hear of some of your experiences and some of your examples and some of your very deep wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review and a star rating on whatever platform you use. And do recommend it to others, because we all have difficult people in our lives, and each of them offers us a real opportunity for learning and growth. For more information about my book and what else I offer, head over to my website, markwestmackett.co.uk. Thanks so much for listening. Bye for now.